a particular resource or activity just to a group. Now, again, for those of you who aren't aware of it, I'm going to point it out first. Right above me, up there somewhere, is a little picture of a man doing this. What I want you to do is actually, if you click on that, you'll see there's an agree option there. So what I want you, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and I just want you to agree. Just give me an idea. Did anybody here not know that in the current version of Moodle, that you can actually have a resource or an activity just for a group of students? Not for everybody. I'm not talking about separate groups here. I mean, you can actually make a resource or activity just for a group of students. Did anybody here not know that you could do that? Well, if it's easier, just type into the chat. Yeah, it's always a few. It's one of those fantastic little hidden features that not many people know about. But let's also be honest. The reason that not many people know about it is that the interface to do it sucks. You're not sure if I want to agree or disagree. I thought I had good sleep patterns, but apparently my coherentness is not working, and 3 hours is not enough sleep. The question I'm asking is, did you know that you could actually take a resource or activity and make it only visible to a group? Yep, Michelle knew. New and used, that's good. The problem is that how it's currently implemented is awful, and it's implemented based on a methodology that was introduced in 1.9, which was the idea of groupings. So what I want to do in this session, I actually have no slides, which A, makes me sound like a very lazy presenter, but you'll see that I'm not because I've been very busy. What I actually want to do is work actually in a live site to show, especially for those who haven't seen it before, how in the current version of Moodle, 1.9 or 2, we can do things just for a group. Highlight, I guess, what I see as the issues of that process. And then to talk about my proposed solution, how I think we can make it better using features now built into Moodle 2. So I guess without further ado, let me just skip across to here. I'm going to try and share my screen. What you should be seeing now is my desktop. Sorry, not my desktop, is my my demo site. Can everybody see the demo site? Yep. Okay, fantastic. So this is a site I've set up. Now, again, let's also start with another warning. This is running 2.3 alpha. I'm helping test the 2.3 rollout, and if we have some time at the end, I might give you a couple of spoilers. I don't want to take too much away from Martin's keynote because he'll be very proud to show off this baby. But as I do some editing, you'll obviously see some changes as I go and do things. And it's also using a custom theme. This theme is not part of 2.3 before anybody gets excited. This is just a theme that I've created called Rocket, which also does change a little bit how Moodle works. What I've done is actually set up two courses for this session, the current group way and my proposed group way. I want to go through the current methodology first because not everybody is aware of how we do it currently, and also allow me to kind of highlight what I think is a flaw in the process. So let me just quickly log into my, my system here. Log in as an admin, make it nice and easy. And let's look at how we set up groups currently. Here is a course I've pre-populated with what I want to achieve. Up the top, I've got some work that I want all students to see. I've got, maybe a discussion forum and an assignment. This is for everybody. But also what I've done, and I wouldn't normally put them in different topics. I've just done it this way to make it really obvious as we start to work through this process. In one topic, I've put a bunch of resources and activities that I just want for Class 1. And underneath it, I put another topic which is just for Class 2. And it's important to talk about why we do this. My background, for those of you who aren't aware, is secondary education. I used to teach in a school and then became an IT manager. And these days, of course, I do consulting and I work a lot with corporate and TAFE and university and technical college. But the reason I like using schools as an example is school is the one sector that you've all been part of. You've all been through school. The idea of talking about classes makes sense to all of us. So it's very easy to translate this into a corporate world, into a university world. But for this example, I'm going to use the idea of classes and a school just because it's something that will make sense to all of us in context. One of the things I do when I go into schools is you come up with a debate. And again, just give me a yes or no in the chat. It's going to be easier. Who here is a Moodle administrator? Who's a Moodle administrator? Oh, Teresa. Teresa is an admin supreme. If you've got admin questions, she is a legend. Ah, got lots of admins in this room. I thought I'd attract that. And again, let me maybe ask this in a slightly better way. Yes and no is going to be an awful way of doing this. Could you type in your current roles? So, I'm going to type in that my current roles in a site is I'm often an admin and a teacher. So I just put admin teacher. Let me know your roles. Admin, teacher, supervisor, lecturer. It doesn't have to be Moodle role. It can be, your title. All right, because the reason I want to ask that question is it'll be interesting to see how people take the next statement, because the next statement is going to offend people, and I apologise. I have lack of sleep. I'm allowed to be tired. One thing that bugs me to a large degree is when I go into a school and the teacher will come and say, I want my own course. I do not want to have Year 10 English or Year 9 Maths. I want Mr. Ridden's Year 9 Maths. And this bugs me, and I will want to explain why just for a second. Do not get me wrong, I understand in certain environments there are requirements for this. Please don't misunderstand that statement. But let me tell you why it bugs me. Moodle is a course-based system. They're called courses. That's a good start, a good little indicator there of what we're doing. And what I love about a course-based system is it's actually meant to be better for the teacher and the student. For the teacher, it means that rather than me having to build an entire course, I can work with my peers and between the 3 or 4 of us build a better course faster. Rather than all of us creating the same resource, or even sometimes some organisations taking exactly the same resource and putting up into 4 locations, we can all work together as a team and do it faster. I'm glad to say that this methodology is changing. I go into more schools now and they're saying, oh yes, no, I like the idea of a course-based system, but the shift we always see, and I think this was talked about in a previous session, I forgot who mentioned it, but we talked about, oh look, I don't want to share a course because Mr. Jones is going to steal my work. Audio keeps going out. That should not be the case. If need be, I do have a microphone, but hopefully... All right, I've just moved to a microphone. Is that any better? It's me. It's always me, Mick. It's always me. Ooh, better. Oh, that's the response I wanted to hear. Okay, I'll keep this microphone plugged in. Sorry about that. And louder. I didn't think I could get louder, Mick. Let's not get too far off track. Sorry about that. Again, if there are issues, do let me know in the chat. The worst thing I'll do is say it's all your fault, but most of the time I'll be rather responsive and try and help. Bill, if it's working better for everybody else, I'm sad to say that might be you. All right. Now, having threatened to do it, I now have to go to Bill, but I won't do that again to anybody else. Let's move forward. So I said the first reason that the idea of a course-based system is it's all about, we're trying to bring it, all together. Make it easier for the teacher. And of course, the other advantage of that is that teachers can also end up not highlighting a deficiency. And, yes, someone's mentioned my still sharing video. Give me 1 second. No, video has stopped. There's no video showing. So I'll try my best. If it's getting so bad it doesn't make sense, we'll see what we can do. But sadly, I think this is as good as it's going to get from my end. So the point about make, it doesn't highlight a deficient teacher. Now, the other example I want to... I've now lost the picture because I did that. Okay. And it's back. Now, when I say highlighting a deficiency, I don't want to say a bad teacher. The other example I want to give is that the last school I was at, and I won't name the teacher because it actually isn't a bad thing. There was a teacher at that school who was 53, 54. I'm not going to say old because I'll offend many people. Let's just say a mature-aged gentleman. Fantastic teacher. His students excelled. But he was a couple of years away from retiring. He didn't want to have to completely change his learning practice. His students were performing extremely well, so he did not use the online learning system very much. At the school I was at, I refused to make it a compulsory tool. I don't believe in forcing teachers in. And because we were a face-to-face environment, Moodle just augmented rather than replaced teaching. So While I didn't like that he didn't use it, I did understand kind of why. The issue you have when you move to separate courses for teachers is that what happens is when his students go online, they get nothing. More importantly, when parents went online, they saw that this teacher was doing nothing. We received so many complaints from parents about this teacher. Even though their students were excelling, that class had the students in the highest bands. And this is why I didn't mind. He was a fantastic teacher. But parents complained because, well, I looked at his online course and there's nothing here. Yeah, parent pressure. So again, I highlight this. He's not a bad teacher. He was a brilliant teacher. And to be honest, I actually even say a friend of mine, so I guess I get a little on his defense for that. But it isolated the students online. They didn't have access to anything. They wanted an online presence because the other classes had it. The parents had an expectation. Bringing it into one course means that, okay, maybe one teacher doesn't do a lot online, but the others do. The students still have access to the other teachers' resources. My background was what's called the HISI faculty, which is modern ancient history is part of that. So I was teaching history. And particularly for that subject, I loved it because with history, it's all about bringing artifacts to a student's attention, allowing them to analyse and assess those artifacts in different points of view. And Moodle was great because in a classroom, I could only ever show you 15% of the resources that I had. And the resources that I had were insignificant compared to the resources of other teachers who've been teaching this subject for years longer than myself. So we had a single course and we all put this information there together. I put up my resources, not just what I covered in class, but the other things that I had, and they put theirs in. And the reason I highlight this is because, well, I'm a very visual person. If you've seen me present before, if you've seen the courses that I've created, you would have seen that they're very visual. That's my learning and my teaching style. I'm also a very communicative teacher, and again, you've heard me speak, you would know that by now. I like to talk. I also like to hear them talk. I like discussion. I like debate. I like thought-provoking analytical discussion. But then, that's my teaching style. There are other teachers who are more textual orientated and who prefer to dictate out. And again, I'm not saying that's a negative style, it's just that's their teaching style. When it's all in one course, just because my resource or activity doesn't appeal to my class doesn't mean the class can't look at others and go, oh, no, that one actually, that explains it now. I didn't get the other one, but I really get that because it was explained in a different way. Again, I start off with this now before I go into this presentation in more detail because what I want to show you is not about isolating resources and activities. In fact, I'm extremely against isolation of resources and activities. In one course with this kind of separation I'm talking about with features, or completely separate courses. Where this becomes important is there are often situations when I do have something that is just for my group. It would make no sense to anybody else. And again, the simplest example I give from the school environment is homework. Homework is informal. It's not part of formal assessment. There's things I want my students to be reinforced with. It might be something I know that they're struggling with. So, yeah, I do apologize. I'm looking at my latency here, and I'm seeing it 21 milliseconds. So my latency is fine, but I think it might be this. Might be the server. So we'll see what happens. But sadly, this is pretty good on my end. 185. Yeah, well, that will certainly kill it. I need to move on. Yeah. So what was the point I was making? Yeah. So there are cases when there are certain resources or activities that don't make sense to a student. And again, a homework task is the simplest, or maybe here's a notice, please make sure you bring your resources to our next session. Well, that next session is just for my students. Here's a task. I want you to complete this assessment by next Friday. But in our university or school, we've got rolling cohorts. So that, one starts in January, one starts in February. The date for the January group will be different to the February group. So there are certain situations like that when we do need, for practicality's sake, to start separating things out. So I guess I want to give that background first before I start showing this. So let's look at how we can do it at the moment. What I'm about to show you is how it works in Moodle 1.9 and how it works in 2. I actually haven't set up the groups yet, because I actually want to do this with you so you can see it. We're going to do it very simple. We're just going to have 2 groups. I hope that most of you know about this. In Moodle, you can go users, groups. You can go there to assign people into groups. And I'm going to create 2 groups. Class 1 and Class 2. And I'm just giving you other features. I might come back to those. But, Class 1 and Class 2. I'm going to assign people into it. Now, if everybody's seen my demo sites before, they notice I like to use Doctor Who. I like using Doctor Who because it allows me to always remember which student is what student number. I've got, my logins are student 1, student 2, student 3. I've actually done them in order of doctor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign my first 4 or 5 doctors to Class 1. Can anybody tell me who was the very first doctor? I think people in my session before would know this by now. Who was the first doctor? Important Moodle question. Oh no, Leslie, I've been brought up on Doctor Who from a young age. Yes, fantastic, it was indeed Hartnell. So, Hartnell, there's Troughton. Patrick Troughton. Patrick Troughton followed by Tom Baker. Tom Baker was followed by Pertwee. And Pertwee was followed by Peter Davison. Okay, and who was... I'm seeing no's. Who was the very first master? This is more of an obscure question. This will sort the fanboys. Who was the very first master? Again, my wonderful psychic Delgado. Very Christopher Lee. You did look a little bit like Christopher Lee. My teachers are the masters. My students are the doctors. See, it actually does work in a way. So, what I've done now is I've created a group and allocated those students, and also notice that I've allocated the teacher. So many organisations forget that the teacher or non-editing teacher should also be part of the group. That way Moodle knows that they're responsible for it. Has anybody ever had complaints that you've used groups in a course and we've created an assignment, we've said send email alerts to teachers, and every teacher in that course gets the email? Or we've turned on subscription in a forum and every teacher gets the email from the forum. If you've got a course with, my year 7 had nearly 200 students, that's a lot of emails for a teacher to receive. If you put a teacher or non-editing teacher into the same group, Moodle knows they're responsible for them, which means that right now, if I was to create an assignment and turn on email alerts, when Tom Baker does an assignment, only Roger Delgado will get the email. So it's a really important trick to know. A separate element of that is that if you're using the non-editing teacher role, remember a non-editing teacher is someone who can't change courseware, they're there to assess. If you add a non-editing teacher to a group, Moodle's even smarter. Oh, you're not creating, so you're just here to assess. So when a non-editing teacher comes in, if they look at the gradebook, they can only see grades of the students that they're there to assess. The other names won't even appear. So if you're dealing with tutors or mentors or parents or things like that, use those roles. I just want to stress, teachers see everything. That's because teachers are the god, so to speak, of a course. They are there to edit everything. They are there to go through and set things up, the same way that an admin is responsible for the site. But non-editing teacher is great for tutors and mentors or facilitators or trainers, depending on your sector, where I only want you to see this subgroup. Anyway, so that's group 1 main. So what did I go up to? I went up to Peter Davison. So let's now do class 2. Second master was Anthony Ainsley, and then Colin Baker, Christopher Eccleston, Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann. I'm sorry, hardcore people, I do count Paul McGann as a doctor. We won't harp on too much about that. Matt Smith, who currently is the best doctor I think we've had. David Tennant, who up until Matt Smith I said was the best doctor we ever had. So what I've done now, you've got to run out. Okay, I'm hurrying up. Sorry, Teresa, I have to explain. I'm trying to give a little bit of background here because there are some people here who aren't familiar with this process. So I do want to make sure I explain the background a little bit. All right, so I've gone through and created our 2 groups. Here is the catch, people. If I go back to my course now, I can do things like separate groups. Thank you, Natalie. If I turn editing on, so you'll notice my screen's a little bit different. This is just my theme, changing buttons. It's not Moodle itself. It's just my theme doing things different. If I go in now and edit the forum, I can't make it just for class 1, but I can do things such as this. group mode. And again, I assume you know about group mode. Group mode means that if I say no groups, everybody can see the content. Separate groups, only people in a group can see the content. Everybody sees the resource or activity, but if, for instance, it was a forum, class 1 would only see class 1 posts. Class 2 would only see class 2 posts. It allows us to segregate the content inside the resource. Even with assignments, I always use separate groups because that means that the gradebook would come in. And yeah, visible groups means that I can only participate with my class, my group, but I can view what the other groups are doing. I can't limit it to just one group. I can just change who can see the content within it. But even right now, there's no way for me to allocate any of these resources. I can't make the class 1 page just for class 1. Okay, lots of people talking. The on-off button is my theme. The turn everything on when you hover over so it doesn't confuse, create a complicated interface, that's my theme. So that's not Moodle 2.3. It's just some cool things you can do with themes. All right. So how in Moodle 1.9 and 2 currently can I make the class 1 page resource only for class 1? Well, here's where the convoluted elements kick in. I cannot make something specific to a group. However, I can allocate something to a grouping. Now, grouping is a new piece of terminology. If you're in your site and you've never seen groupings before, it's probably because it's not turned on. If you go to Site Administration, Development Experimental Settings, we've got a feature here called Enable Group Members Only. I'm going to turn this on. Now, I want to highlight it's experimental. It's been experimental for a while, and I'll explain why it's still experimental as we move forward. I'm actually turning that feature on. I'm also making sure. So now I'm going to go back to my course. Because I put a tick and allow for groupings, members of groupings, I now have a new feature in my course. The first thing I'm going to do is go back to my groups. I cannot allocate something to a class. I just want to stress that. I cannot allocate something in Moodle 1.9 or 2 to a group. I can allocate things to groupings, and this is what many organisations have had to do. If I want to create a resource just for class 1, I create the group, and then I have to do this, create grouping. Create a class 1 grouping. And then go through and add a single class to the grouping. Now, as far as I'm aware, and certainly how I interpret it, this is an abuse of how groupings are meant to work. The idea of groupings, again, for those of you who aren't aware, is that groupings are for a collection of groups. I use groupings constantly, and I will stress later on, I'm not actually ever at any point trying to advocate the end of groupings. I use groupings all the time when I want to create a task where I want students working in pairs or working in groups of 4. Groupings are a way of creating different types of group and categorizing them together. Teresa, thank you for linking to the docs. So I'm going to create 2 groupings here, class 1, class 2. I hope you're starting to see what I mean by not intuitive. Why do I have to create a grouping just to put one group inside of? This is ridiculous. Well, to do this at the moment, this is what we have to do. I now go back to my course. Because I put a tick in the experimental setting, if I now edit my class 1 resource, I can do the following. This is a standard activity. This is just a resource. Sorry, this is just a page, name, description, content. If I click Show Advanced, I have the option now to allocate it to a grouping. This says available for group members only. If I tick on that box, I can choose the grouping. Now wait a second, available for group members only, but you want me to choose a grouping. Well, here's where again we start getting to a bit of weird territory. I can make this available to people in a group only. If they're not a member of this group, you cannot even see it, and I'll demo that in a second. But that group can only be allocated by grouping. This one here is for, what one was it, sorry? Class 1. Class 1, group members only, class 1. Save return to course. You'll now see that it says class 1 next to it. I can very quickly do it for these. It's very quick to do once you know it. Group members only, class 1. Now, there was rationale behind this at the time. There are many reasons that this can be very useful. I might have a task I want students working in pairs. So I'm going to go, whoops, I'm not paying attention here. So I might create a special grouping where I separate students into groups of 2. Might have another task where I want to use them in groups of 4, be assigned to a mentor. And I create groupings for each of those elements. But for this is just overkill. And for this reason, not many teachers know about it. Alright, so that's my class 1 work done, and I'll quickly do class 2. Has anybody done this in the past, just while I'm doing it? Ah, someone's picked up on the issue too. No, they haven't. This is why it's still listed in experimental. The issue that we have with this methodology as well is that even though when I log in as a student, they can only see it if they're in class 1 or 2, it still appears in their gradebook. The gradebook doesn't read off this, which creates issues. And so this is experimental still because that hasn't been fixed. And until that gets fixed, I don't think it should move out of experimental. Alright, sorry about that. I just wanted to do that in front of everybody for those who hadn't seen it before. So I've now gone through and said this is for class 1, this is for class 2. These up here are for everybody, but I've gone through and set it to separate groups. They can only see their own work inside of it. Okay, that's lots of setup. Teresa's still probably getting impatient because she goes, I know all of this, but bear with me. Let me now log in as a student and show you what they see. Let's log in as a student from class 1. Here's William Hartnell. William Hartnell's going to come in and look what happened. First of all, class 2 work. Again, ignore the topic heading. I've just done that to make it really obvious. You wouldn't normally do it that way. But notice that the class 2 work is not appearing to this student. He's only seeing the class 1 work. He's seeing 2 assignments in his calendar. The assignment for all classes and the assignment for class 1. If I was to go through, up the top's for everybody. So if I was to go and do a forum post, and this one up here, I have turned on separate groups. But when you're seeing logged in as a student from class 2, you'll still see the activity, but you won't see that post. That does work. Okay, that's great. Class 1, class 2 work. But sadly, when someone beat me to the punch, the issue with this methodology, I mean, it's great. It's working from a student's perspective. If I go to grades, look at the gradebook. I can still see the class 2 assignment. That's still showing up there. So, and by the way, they're not showing all assignments, but I didn't give all of them grades. I was in a rush setting this one up, so I just want to make sure there's enough to demo the data. Even though I'm in class 1, I can't see activity, I can still see the grade for the assignment. So, yeah, there is a flaw there. Let's quickly log out. Log in as a student from the next one. Let's log in as student 6. Student 6 is in class 2. Here's Colin Baker. Colin Baker logs in. He's not seeing class 1 work, but I am seeing my class 2 work, and I'm only seeing 2 assignments. But the one on the 29th, the class 1 assignment's missing, but I am seeing the everybody assignment, and I am seeing the class 2 assignment. So visually, that is working. If I go into the discussion forum, notice that William Hartnell's post is not showing. He was in class 1. This is set to separate groups. But I can come in here and do my post. So I've just demoed how it works currently. Let's talk about the flaws, or what I perceive as the flaws. Does it work? Yes. Does it work from the student when they come in? Yes. Is it in, are there a couple of glitches? Yes, but I'm not going to pick on that element of it because it's still a work in progress, it's experimental, so I don't want that to be seen as a harsh element of my criticism at the moment. The issue with the gradebook needs to be solved, but that's separate to my problem here. Was it intuitive at all for a teacher to set up? No. In fact, many people here probably didn't know about it. The terminology doesn't make sense. So I'm going to finally make Teresa happy and talk about how can we do this better. So this is my proposal. Now this is actually a piece of code. I actually came up with the idea based on another activity. Now Mark Nelson, who works at Pukenui, there's some wonderful self-promotion, was working on a piece of code for a client. The client had come up and said, do you know these conditional activities? we love the conditional activities, but we want to extend it. We want to be able to do different things with it. And so Mark wrote a fantastic patch to allow us to use these restrictions in some cool new ways. So what I'm about to show you was hopefully going to make it into 2.3. I don't know if Shane can actually update me here. I think it missed the cut for 2.3. This is actually going to go into 2.4. I hope by now you're all aware of conditionals in Moodle, the ability to be able to go through and restrict a resource by a date or by a completion. What Mark wrote for a client, this is really clever, it's a fantastic piece of code, was the ability to also restrict it based on user field. This is only available if their country is Australia. This is only available if the email address contains staff at. It's only available, in fact, it allows you to query any of the user profile fields, including custom profile fields, and be able to say that this will only appear or show based on that condition. Fantastic piece of code. Martin loved it. Guys at HQ liked it. Yeah, in drilling, definitely should commence. We were hoping it was going to make it into 2.3. I don't think it made the cut because of time reasons. It will definitely be going into 2.4 if you don't see it in the 2.3 release. And Mark did this though. I had a kind of an epiphany, what I like to refer to as the brain fart moment. My brain just went, oh. I said, well, wait a second. If we can query that kind of information, wouldn't it make sense that we actually also allow it to restrict it by group? And I want to explain why this is such a big thing for me here. If I want to restrict something to a group, doesn't it make sense that I'd look for it in the restriction area? The same place I restrict by date, the same place I restrict by grade, the same place I restrict by completion. Why do I go to a place called groups? Well, I have to create the group first, but then to groupings, and then to allocate to a group of a grouping is overkill. Why not just make it as part of the restriction? Leave groupings for setting up groupings, and it is logical. And again, I want to point out, when the groupings were first introduced and the ability to lock to grouping, conditionals didn't exist. That was 1.9. So it kind of got born out of how Moodle was working in 1.9. But with Moodle 2 introduced restrict access, it added so many more possibilities. So how about this? In this course here, before I do it, just to make sure you can see what I've done here, we're going to set up groups. But it's going to be much faster this time because I'm not going to care about groupings. Don't care about groupings at all. There's class 1, class 2, already created. Groupings, not needed for this example. I'm now going to go through and say that this resource is just for class 1. Well, great, conditionals are on. So he's going to come in here, restrict it to class 1. Save return to course. I think that that is a lot more self-explanatory. By the way, to save time, you notice I've already done class 2. And it also gives us a lot more options. You know what? I want to restrict it to class 1, but I want to show it grayed out. So if there's any confusion, if people say, I've got this resource, and someone says I don't, well, it will show this is only available for class 1 members only. It also gives a lot more flexibility than what we had in the past, where either you saw it or you didn't. So I'm going to hide it entirely. The first one, I'm actually going to have it show a message, just so you can see it. For me, I think it's just a very simple extension of a very obvious way of working. And of course the next thing, and I'm not going to do it for this particular example, but if you need it to be available to multiple groups, all you have to do is, as you can with conditionals, add more of them. This is available to class 1, and it's also available to class 2. Which means you don't have, if you've got one particular example where this is for 2 groups, you don't have to go and create a special grouping just for it, come back and do it. You can just easily on the fly restrict it to multiple groups. Alright, now that I've done that, let's log in as a student, see how this works. Again, let's log in back in as student 1. Student 1's going to go in. I'm not seeing the class 2 work, just like before, but I'm seeing the class 1 work. Now, I haven't tested this before. We still have the same issue with the assignment in Gradebook. The Gradebook isn't intelligent enough at the moment to look for completion criteria or to look at the grouping criteria, and I do hope that gets fixed in the future. So that same issue still appears, which is why I didn't make a big deal about it earlier. But it does allow me to go through and easily assign it. And let me quickly log in as student 7, because I did something a little bit different for class 2. Notice that class 2, here are my resources. I actually set it up that they can still see these two, but they can't click on it. They're not accessible to you. They're not available unless you're a member of the group. So depending on your requirements, you can actually set this up how you want. The reason I want to do this presentation and highlight this to people and show you what's possible is I come from the coalface personally. I'm a very big believer that usability often is the key to success. Large universities would not like this, and I understand why. Large universities are dealing with dozens, if not hundreds of groups, and they use groupings for all kinds of very advanced functionality. But universities aren't the only user of Moodle. Lots of users of Moodle are the small company, are the school, are the technical college, places where it needs to be quick, it needs to be easy, it needs to be efficient. And this proposed solution is about doing exactly that. So that's a quick demo I wanted to show you of our proposed solution. Let's talk about how you can help make it happen. And it's, as I said, Moodle responds to community. Moodle responds to what people want. And the reason I want to do this session is to highlight this is what obviously I want. I think this is fantastic. At the moment, this is going to have to be a plugin. I really love to see something like this in Core because every single non-university client I go to wants this. So how can we do that? The first thing I'm going to talk about is, of course, the Moodle forums. Moodle forums are a great place to start discussion, and what you'll actually see there, I've actually started a post. So you see, just moving this up here, I'm just going to actually add a place where I can put some links so you guys can easily take these and use them. What am I doing here? Web links. There we go. So guys, so when I add them down here, you'll just be able to click on them and they'll launch. So make it much easier for you to keep up with what I'm doing. Well, it won't get much bigger, so let's just drag this up. Okay. So the first thing I did was started a discussion on Moodle.org. I'm actually not sure. Did I just send your browsers there? I may have. There in chat, just in case I stuffed that up. So that discussion there was started back on the 14th of May and got a lot of traction. And by the way, what I love about Moodle, I may be adamant that something is right, but it doesn't mean that it's right. You know, that's just my particular point of view. What I love about the Moodle community is that we're very lucky that we don't have many trolls. You know, but for those who aren't familiar with the term troll, you go into certain communities, and this happens a lot in places like the Joomla community, and it happens a lot in many of the open source projects, where people are just there to make trouble, just there to complain, they're just there to whinge. Moodle, we've got a very, very tiny percentage of those people. So when I go through and start a discussion here, and I explain my methodology of what I suggested, I put some photos in, explained how it would work, it started a whole bunch of discussion and debate, and I would really love to encourage you, please, to come in and join this discussion. Because if there's enough interest, or maybe we can make it even better, maybe this could be better for universities if we adjusted it this little bit of way. I want to encourage you to please come in, check out the forum, and add your comments. Now we're seeing here, Stefan Rink has come in and tried to explain it his own way. He's actually taken photos of a whiteboard. That's how he could visualize it. This is what the Moodle community is awesome with. You know, there's Mark Dreschler saying he agrees with it. I know there are a few people here who didn't. I know that, where is it here? Gavin Henrik thinks there's a different way of doing it. So yeah, please come in and add your comment. If you want to have a bigger impact, this is a good place for discussion, this is a good place for debate, this is a good place to say, okay, how can we make it better? If you actually want to make a difference, you need to check out the Moodle Tracker. The Tracker is a place that not only do we go through and put bugs, you know, again, I'm sure you've all gone through and heard about how we put bugs into the tracker. But it's also a place where we go through and talk about enhancements. Now, as I said, Mark Nelson went through and created this once he created the code. It's a new feature. We'd like to see it, in a future development of Moodle. We've gone through and put pictures and a whole bunch of discussions started. And here is, I guess, the ugly side of Moodle. And I don't like using it, but sadly this didn't end the nicest way, and it's certainly not finished. Again, I want to encourage you to come in. Now, Sam Marshall is one of the developers. He actually works for Open University. He comes from a very university-centric background. He also works on core Moodle code, and he was allocated to this. Sam thinks there's a different way of doing it. Sam's way involves he wants to stay with groupings and change the interface. And again, me personally, be very careful. It's not about people fighting. It's just about different points of view. Me personally, I don't like his methodology because his methodology is still big. It's grandiose. It's aimed at universities. He works in a university, so he wants a solution that works there. I want to find a solution for everybody else. So there's lots of discussion here, and sadly, I talk about the ugly side. You kind of put a rather harsh comment at the end, which kind of shut down discussion. I would again like to encourage you to please come in and start discussion. Sam is not nearly as nasty as he sounds in this post. I've met Sam, I've worked with Sam. I have a feeling that maybe he was having a bad day at this point in time. But of course, people who haven't met Sam, who don't know Sam, have probably read this and went, oh, this is how Moodle works, and it kind of killed discussion. If you do agree, or maybe you agree a little bit and have a different idea, or maybe you disagree but have an idea of how we could do it better. Forum's a good place to get the discussion going, but if you actually want to see change, please come in and add it to the tracker, because this is where Martin checks for things. If you're not worried about, if you're not sure about adding a comment here, you feel uncertain, and sadly based on the kind of comments that Sam pretty much can understand that, I'm trying to encourage you. It's not normally that way. Sam isn't that kind of person. I would encourage you to post. But if you do feel afraid to do that, you can also at the top here vote. Now, what I love about this is you can already see we've got 39 votes. Voting is something I'd like to see. Voting is a simple way of Martin and the developers at Moodle HQ to go, wow, there's a lot of people wanting this. This is something we should evaluate and look at more closely. And clicking in here, we can see we kind of launched it and it just spiked. The forum and the tracker, again, I put links in the chat. Obviously, I pushed you there. How would it impact the bigger implications? It wouldn't, and this is where we get into the debate about how code works. My point is that it shouldn't be one or the other. I actually want a duplication of process. Why do I want a duplication of process? Because it's all about using the tool that's right for you. Database and glossary both do the same thing. They're a duplication of process, but glossary is quick and easy for teachers who just want to create a simple database of terms, and database is a lot more functional, does a lot bigger things for people who know their way around. My suggestion here is to kind of repeat the same kind of thing. I'd like to add the condition to restrict access because that makes sense. It's where I would think of looking, and I'd like to think that you guys agree. It's a very logical place to go. Oh, I've got groups. I want to restrict this to a group. Let's go to restrict access. But for the bigger organizations, we leave groups and groupings. And Sam's suggestion of redoing that interface and making that interface more appropriate to large organizations would be there. That just means you go for the right place for the job that you're trying to achieve. That at least is my solution. From a coder's perspective, we call this code bloat. Wait a second, you're suggesting that we've got two ways of implementing the same feature? Yes. Why? I believe that usability is paramount over code. And developers will argue that, and users will argue that. And the reality is often the answer is somewhere in between. And that's why, again, I want to get the discussion going. Why I want to encourage those who are here to become part of that discussion. Maybe you have an idea of how we can make it intuitive and better and a logical place and bring it all together. Look, tell us. I want to hear it. I think this is right. It may not be right. And I guess I'm very keen to make that point a few times because the idea of this session is to show that there are other options being developed and that the community is going to shape this. And so I really want to hear from you and your ways of doing it. But yeah, so Leslie, the short answer is the bigger implication, the way I'm proposing it, is that existing people do it exactly as they did. If you need groups that are more dynamic, you create a grouping, you easily add or remove groups, and then that permission would follow through into the courses and into the resources and activities automatically. Universities need that kind of level of functionality. Awesome. keep it in the advanced area. Sam's suggestion is to redo the interface. It needs to be redone because it's awful. Great. But for teachers, for the quick users, for that one time, I just want to add something to a class. Don't make us go through the 15 extra clicks and the 4 extra steps. Let's just make it a one click and it's done. And that's what I want to suggest. If you want to grab the code, first of all, I want to point out the link actually is here. But at Pukenui, we do try and keep our code public. We're very proud of our open source heritage and where we come from, and we try and share everything. Mark Nelson has actually gone through and uploaded the code into what's called GitHub. Now, for the coders in the room, what you're seeing here, this is just a direct link, by the way, from the tracker. So in the tracker, when I click on the link, it sends you to this page. This page actually goes through and gives you a diff based on the current Moodle master, the 2.3 master. So the awesome thing about this, it goes through and it tells you what code has changed. If you know how to do code merges out of Git, it'll do it automatically. If you're a manual person, you can come through and it tells you which files and which lines have changed. If you want to go through and do that, the code is all here and it's public. If you don't want to do a merge, you can just go back to the, what am I doing here? Back to the files area. And you can download Mark's full copy of Moodle with the patch already in place. Now, by the way, this is alpha. People do not even dream of putting this on a live site. Because we're trying to get this into Moodle 2.3, we built the code on 2.3. So, yeah, this is not something you want to go and do to your site now. Look, I guess that's it. What I'd like to do in the last few minutes of this session now is open up discussion. I hope I've made clear on numerous times you're not going to offend me if you disagree. In fact, this is what I want to hear. If you have a different variation on it. Or is this something that you think would be optimal for you? Do you have questions about the methodology? What I'd like to do now is open up for questions. Thanks, Mandy. And that was the core of it. It is about simplicity, speed, and intuitiveness. That certainly was the intent. Bring back to the chat. Yeah, no. That first bit of code, by profile field, is definitely making it. It's definitely going to make it into 2.4. I don't know if it's actually been locked out of 2.3 completely. In fact, if I have a chance, I'll check the tracker in Moodle in just a second and find out. But it will definitely be in 2.4, so you can look forward to that. At the moment, it doesn't change the gradebook issue. It doesn't shift it in any way, shape, or form. There are a few things in the tracker about getting the gradebook adapted to recognise the conditionals. So look out for that. But at the moment, it doesn't complicate or simplify. It pretty much leaves the issues as it stands. I'd like to think that no matter which solution ends up being the final one, the gradebook does need to be adapted so that if students aren't accessing a resource or activity, then that shouldn't show up in the gradebook. Absolutely, Mr. Wong, or Mrs. Wong, so I can't tell the WL there. In the groups screen, users groups. And this is also in Moodle 1.9, by the way, so it actually helps if a teacher logged in as a student. Bear with me. And this is current Moodle I'm about to show you. When you have groups, users groups, I can also auto-create groups. If you auto-create groups, take the students, select them by either, select from a cohort. This is a cool feature coming in 2.3. 2.3 will finally allow us to go through and do it by cohort. Do it by number of groups or by members in a group. Do them in groups of 4 people or split everybody randomly into 4 groups. Let's say members per group. Put them into 2 and let's call it task a work group. And that at the end means it's going to put letters in. By the way, the help is always also in Moodle. If you put an at, it'll put A, B, C. If you put a hash, it'll put 1, 2, 3. And create a new grouping called task A workgroups. And this won't disappear. I use this all the time in Moodle because I can now go through, and there they are, automatically separated into pairs. I could now create a forum and say this forum is just for the task A workgroups. in that forum, they'll only see the other person that they're working with. They can now use it as a conversation space.